Laura Carlsen is the director of the Americas program at the Center for International Policy. I asked her, since Mexico City also elected its first ever female mayor, if this is indeed the year of the woman in the country.
It might be an exaggeration, Roee, but we're on the right path, that's for sure. Mexico has made some major changes, and most of those changes have been because of pressure from a more active feminist movement in the country that has managed to achieve these very, very important victories along the way. We have seen massive movements against violence against women, against the disappearances, against the femicides, against violence in the context of the universities and in the context of the homes that have made advances, but we still see an extremely high level. It's in the context of violence in general that Mexico's experiences as a result of the war on drugs that has also increased in the situation of what we call impunity, where there's lack of justice, that has increased violence against women. So it's been a critical situation that has really compelled women to speak up, and they've managed to make these kinds of advances we've seen along the way. As we said, there's a difference between what happens on paper and what happens in practice. When Frank was talking about this new female-dominated, almost Congress that we have now, he was talking about some of the obstacles along the way, and they're really impressive. When the quota system went into effect, for example, we had a case that was called the Juanitas. What happened is the political parties put up a candidate, a male candidate, to comply with the quota system, and within a week of being elected, a female candidate, excuse me, within a week of being elected, she stepped down so that her husband or another male candidate would take her place. So the women had to work to get measures in to fill the loopholes that the political parties were inventing all the time to try to get around some of these measures, until finally it was possible to reach the point where we are now.
Laura, you talked about the violence in the context of the organized war against the war against organized drug trafficking. We should point out that's been going on now for about a decade with this government and the government before. According to UN Women, just last year, 15% more women were killed compared to the year earlier. So how might having this presence of women in Congress affect that?
It's really important not to confuse parity, the numbers being more equal, with gender justice. Up to now, we haven't seen a really clear legislative agenda that talks about the role that violence against women plays in reproducing and in increasing violence in general, and that eliminating violence against women could play in reducing the violence, which is one of the major objectives of the new government. So it's been very difficult. It's again been a long struggle in Mexico because femicides, they began to be recognized. There began to be a plethora of organizations, of government offices to deal with it. And despite all the attention, the numbers didn't go down. What was happening is what's called simulation, where the government was pretending that it was doing something about femicides, but it was unwilling to go up against the criminals that were responsible for it, often attached to organized crime, where there was collusion with government, or members of government themselves. So in this case, there's been a promise to eliminate impunity, that no one will be above the law. The new government is saying that there will be not necessarily new legislation, because the legislation is largely in place, but a real enforcement of the law that could finally bring those numbers down.
All right, Laura Carlsen, always a pleasure to see you from the Center for International Policy.